And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Frank Selke, Chairman of the Committee on Scientific Sessions Program. Dr. Selke is the Carl Carlson and Gloria Carlson Professor of Cardiothoracic Surgery at the Brown Medical School, and he is Chief of Cardiothoracic Surgery at Rhode Island Hospital. Please welcome Dr. Frank Selke.
Good afternoon. I'm Frank Selke, Chairman of the Committee on Scientific Sessions Program. I'd like to welcome you to the 2016 American Heart Association Scientific Sessions. The program committee has worked for the past year putting together a truly remarkable program. First, I'd like to thank my co-chair, Eric Peterson, and AHA President, Steve Hauser, as well as all the members of the Committee on Scientific Sessions programming listed, for their guidance, insight, and hard work to create this excellent program. These members of the 16 AHA scientific councils have created content in 25 tracks available to you this year. They also oversaw the process from submission to peer review to the final assembly of the program, not a small task. I would also like to thank the staff of the American Heart Association for all of their efforts. Additionally, I would like to thank the following educational grant supporters of the American Heart Association Scientific Sessions 2016: AstraZeneca, Merck, and Pfizer. We're delighted to continue the tradition of being the best class meeting for clinical and scientific learning. Our more than 800 sessions offer content which spans all aspects of cardiovascular disease in the basic, clinical, population, and transitional fields, including genetics, genomics, signaling, molecular pathways, heart failure, acute coronary syndrome, vascular disease, cholesterol, interventions in disparate populations, gene editing, and strategies to align big data, to name just a few. The AHA Scientific Sessions is the only meeting in the cardiovascular disease offering this breadth and depth of clinical and cardiovascular science content. Our hope is that you discover the latest advances in your specialty or connect with others across the discipline and others. The Committee for Scientific Sessions Planning has embedded into the program many innovative learning strategies to enhance your learning experience. In addition to our traditional oral and poster presentations, we have included boot camps, audience response systems, rapid fire sessions, flipped classrooms, simulation, hands-on experiences, gamification, case theaters, TED-style talks, and panel discussions. In the Science and Technology Hall, we integrated the posters with other areas of learning. We invite you, the attendees, to choose the learning strategy that best meets your style. At the heart of sessions is networking. There are receptions for the councils and early career attendees, as well as specific networking opportunities in the EP and interventional central areas. A variety of lounges allow for a place to relax and discuss the hottest topics of the day. The American Heart Association Scientific Sessions is truly an international meeting. Nearly 35% of our faculty are international, and almost half of the original science presented is from outside the United States. In addition, we have 27 joint sessions with international cardiovascular organizations featuring globally relevant topics. Special lectures continue to be the highlight of the meeting. You have just heard from Dr. Stephen Hauser with his presidential address. In a few minutes, the Lewis A. Connor Lecture will be given by Dr. Robert Calif, Commissioner of the Food and Drug Administration. Tomorrow, we are honored to have Nobel laureate James Rothman of New Haven, Connecticut, presenting a lecture on how molecular messages are transmitted inside and outside of our cells. Then on Tuesday, the Paul Dudley White Lecture will be given by Dr. Stephanie Dimmler of Frankfurt, Germany. And the 2016 AHA Distinguished Scientist Lecture, entitled Contributions of Epidemiology to the Prevention of Stroke and Dementia, will be given by Dr. Philip A. Wolfe. Late-breaking clinical sessions will begin this afternoon with the session entitled Big Trials for Big Questions, and will include presentations from the investigators from the Euclid and Precision trials. This week, data from recent late-breaking clinical trials will be presented daily. Be sure to review the program agenda on the AHA mobile meeting guide to get the full details. The Precision Medicine Summit has been created to bring forward a discussion of contemporary topics in the precision medicine field by leaders in the area. The summit kicks off on Monday with a main event session featuring an overview of precision medicine, including perspectives from the FDA, patients, and the Silicon Valley. Additional precision medicine sessions are scheduled throughout the day. 2 areas dedicated to specific specialties have been created in the Science and Technology Hall. EP Central started in 2015. It created a home for the community of electrophysiology clinicians and scientists to gather, network, exchange information, or just to relax. This year, we are excited to feature Interventional Central, an additional area which will allow a place for interventional clinicians and scientists to interact. In both of these areas, you'll find networking spaces as well as educational and career development topics using creative methods such as a Jeopardy competition. The Simulation Zone is a dedicated area in the Science and Technology Hall featuring different simulation activities. Sessions are scheduled throughout the day. Simulation activities will include the use of ultrasound, mechanical circulatory support, TAVR, and 12 virtual cases in the disease states of acute coronary syndrome, arrhythmias, heart failure, endocarditis, atherosclerosis, and acute ischemic stroke. Don't miss these unique opportunities. I would encourage you all to stop by and share your experience with your council members and others for next year. We are excited about our growing Frontiers in Science program. Frontiers in Science were started in 2015 to create a forum for open dialogue and rapid-fire presentations. Because these presentations represent an opportunity for pre-publication dissemination, content is not available outside of the room in which they are presented. This year's 4 programs focus on arrhythmia, stem cells, vascular disease, and thrombosis. The AHA Mobile Meeting Guide is your all-access guide to Scientific Sessions 2016. Details for the entire conference can be easily referenced, including educational sessions, council information, exhibit details, shuttle information, and much more. The app also includes a social Q&A feature, which allows you to ask presenters questions directly through the app. Now you can ask your question directly to the presenters in the room of hundreds of people. You can also vote for the questions that interest you, which would ensure the most relevant questions that can be highlighted. In conclusion, we are delighted you are here and hope you will find that the addition to the networking venue that facilitates your personal and professional growth. Scientific Sessions provides you with the cutting-edge clinical and scientific content you have come to expect. Enjoy, and we will see you at Scientific Sessions 2017 in Anaheim.
Thank you, Dr. Selke. It's a great program and a tremendous amount of work. Thank you, Frank, to yourself and your team. Each year, the Lewis A. Conner Memorial Lecture is presented by a distinguished scholar, researcher, or national leader in the health field. The lecture honors the memory of Dr. Conner, one of the founders of the American Heart Association and its first president in 1924. We are privileged to once again welcome to the stage Dr. Robert Calif, who will present our Conner Lecture. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Calif.
Thanks so much, and it's a real honor to be delivering this lecture, especially after the amazing job that Dr. Hauser and Dr. McRae did, pretty much saying everything I had planned to say. So I figure I have 25 minutes to riff here about the issues that I think are really important. And I have one simple message to all of you. I truly believe that the next revolution in cardiovascular care, in fact in medicine in general, will come through information sharing, because everything is in place now to advance knowledge at a rate that we could have never imagined before, and to translate that into clinical care at a very accelerated pace. The limiting factor is us. My personal perspective is that I've been privileged to witness a revolution in cardiovascular care. Some of you are old enough to remember that when I took over the Duke Coronary Care Unit, we did not know what caused heart attacks. There was a raging debate. And it was only some courageous cardiologists doing live interventional cases in people with heart attacks that showed the blood clot sitting there that was such a great target. That, combined with insights in public health measures like blood pressure and fundamentals of diet, have been the part of tremendous advances. We have amazing drugs and devices. We've taken on the menace of tobacco, and we're winning the battle at this point, although it's my duty to remind you that we have not won the battle, with still 40 million Americans smoking, and even 15% of people with heart failure still using tobacco products. But the end result of all this work has been a 50% reduction or more in the age-specific mortality rates of Americans, and a tremendous effect in people around the world. The next revolution, I believe, will result from the transformation of information. But in order to apply this fundamental revolution to improve health and quality of life, it's critical that we do some very fundamental things that we all need to work together to achieve. The first, as simple as it may sound, is to learn how to share. We have so many incentives that keep us from sharing information, whether it's an academic promotion, getting the next grant, or what I think the largest factor is today, the attitude that patient information is an asset to integrated health systems to be held tightly and not shared with other people. And to make this work, we need to think beyond just the let's work together sort of attitude and think about the business models that will really make this work at a fundamental level. We need to invest heavily in curating information. I'll have more to say about that later. We need to work together to develop the social and ethical constructs that deal with privacy, confidentiality, and security. And as someone who showed up in WikiLeaks, I can assure you that I'm well aware that no one can guarantee absolutely that one's information will be secure, but we need to gain confidence in the public that we're doing the very best that we can and that we'll deal with it if problems do occur. We need to create a workforce that can both create new methods and integrate information into practice. And even more importantly than that, because I think the workforce, if you look at young trainees today, is voting with its feet, we must give the workforce time to invest in knowledge generation as a routine part of practice. And then finally, and not to be forgotten, we have to work with the public to gain support and understanding. And this is where the American Heart Association has played such a vital role, and I think will continue to do so. Simply put, we have a situation in which we all aspire to take the best research evidence, to take into account the desires and interests of patients, and then apply our clinical expertise to do the best job possible with each individual and with populations. The point I want to make is that we're now at a time when we can optimize the evidence so that we can do a much better job with the other parts. This is a slide I've used over many years that I'm sure very few people in the audience would fundamentally disagree with. To do the best job, we need to continue the amazing investment that has occurred in basic science, including the funding of NIH and the support of American Heart Association. Then we need to take early translational steps very carefully, remembering that as well as we're doing with therapies today, it's still the case that 92% of drugs which enter phase 1, human clinical trials, don't make it to market because they either don't work as expected, they have unexpected toxicity, or they can't be manufactured in a way which allows them to be viable. So these early translational steps, getting them right, having good validity of the information, is absolutely critical to the rest of the chain of knowledge. And then larger clinical trials to answer the questions, is this treatment safe and effective, and how should we use this treatment in practice relative to other options that we have. The AHA and ACC have done really the leadership role in developing clinical practice guidelines to boil down the knowledge into digestible information that can be used by practitioners. And of course, the very best information that we have goes into performance measures so that we can assess ourselves as to how well we're doing in practice. At the center of all this is measurement and education, and this is where I think we need to make a major step to integrate this information, as Dr. McCrae said, into a continuum. It was really impossible to do this until the computational and analytical methods that are now available became available. Now, what evidence do I have that we need more evidence? It's pretty simple. If you look at our clinical practice guidelines today, the best that we have, the vast majority of recommendations are not supported by high-quality evidence. Just to pick on an area other than cardiology, every day I spend time on the opioid problem we have in the United States. And this is not lost to cardiovascular practitioners in addition to all practitioners. The CDC guidelines, the very best that we have, which we fully endorse at the FDA, for the 13 major decisions to be made about prescribing opioids, none of the 13 are supported by high-quality evidence according to the evidence scale. We have tremendous work to do to rev up this evidence generation machine so that when we tell patients something or patients make a decision, we have confidence that we're doing the right thing. The fundamental flaw in the system in the past, I believe, in addition to the technical issue, was that the ability to measure, compare, and draw conclusions was limited to the individual lab, clinic, or system. And as I say, there were good reasons for that. It was hard to do, so that when we did multi-system or multi-site studies, we had to create a whole separate mechanism to do it that stood apart from clinical care. But changes in information and data science and computation now allow us to overcome these technical limits. The only limits we have now, in my view, are purely cultural. In the old system, one would generate an idea, obtain funding, build a research system, conduct research, decide on whether to disseminate it, and if so, how. And by the way, this is a chance for me to remind you that we finalized the rule on clinicaltrials.gov requiring that all clinical trials, except for some exceptions that deal with medical products, must be registered and must have the results posted within 1 year of completion of the primary outcome. Or, I've never been in this situation before, I can fine you $10,000 per day per infraction. I'm not sure exactly what to do with that kind of power, but I hope it's a power that's never needed, because it's an ethical obligation when one obtains consent to do a good job with the study and to disseminate the results, even if we're unhappy with the results, to the rest of the world. But in the old world, then we'd tear down the study and start over again with the next project. And learning was considered something separate from clinical practice. There's almost nothing else in the world that we do now where we build it and tear it down every time we do a part of it. And so the new system should be a system. We should allocate funding to the best ideas across the system. We should use existing resources and common standards and information. Information should accrue through transparency and sharing, not through hoarding and selective release. And we start the next project by taking advantage of the standing infrastructure. In this system, learning is simply a part of practice, not something that stands apart. These are not new concepts. I didn't invent them. And in fact, if you look at this over decade-old slide from the traditional HMO systems in the United States, you'll see something that looks eerily the way normal business runs today in the United States. When you buy something on Amazon, or you go on a Google website, or you shop at Walmart, pretty much anything you do, your behavior in the shopping experience is measured as a routine. And interestingly, the information is not analyzed at the local store level, it's analyzed nationally to optimize your shopping experience. And of course, in that situation, to analyze how to get you to spend as much money as possible. In our case, the same methods can be applied to optimize the patient's experience, where our dependent outcome is longevity and functional status, not how much money comes in. It's entirely possible for us to do this now that all Americans essentially have electronic health records. Now, we have a ways to go in optimizing electronic health records, but it's within grasp that this could happen. And by the way, in this business system, and taught in the first semester of most MBA courses now, is what's called the A-B comparison. It's a simple, pragmatic, randomized trial done because it's the most effective way to figure out what the best option is out of two options. And so we need to get over this in medicine, that somehow we know the answer when we really don't. Admit when we don't know the answer and use randomization efficiently within a system such as this to get the answers as quickly as possible. Now, I apologize for the FDA-centric slides, but in my current job, I can't separate myself from my job. It's not something I can do, but this pertains to all of us. The key ingredients, the number one ingredient is patient partnerships. It's a direct involvement of people who have the problems or are concerned about the problems with the entire process, from deciding what research is done to how the research is done and how the results should be disseminated. The second is this amazing transformation from almost no Americans having real electronic health records to, thanks to a $50 billion investment of your tax money, to almost every American now having an electronic record with digital data. We just have to figure out how to use it. And then, of course, we have the wearable technologies, which allow us to assess things in dimensions that just could not be assessed in any other way before. These things were unimaginable until very recently, but as you've heard from Dr. McCrae, the AHA is funding a major project to show everyone else how to bring these things together, and I hope we'll all end up collaborating on it. And then, of course, genomics. I'll admit I was a bit of a skeptic in the early days of personalized medicine, but we're now in an era where genetic information is readily accessible as we go to the $300 whole genome sequence. Quite an interesting issue for regulation at the FDA, by the way. And this can be incorporated into electronic health records, opening possibilities we never imagined. And at the core of this, of course, is data science, the ability to bring this information together in a way which can be applied to the individual. So how can this work? It cannot work by the old way that made my career. The reason I'm standing here today is I figured out early on that in the old world, the Coordinating Center for Clinical Research had the data, and the data was really the key asset. But the definition of a good research site was one that followed orders. That's not the way to get Americans involved in much of anything, and we need to change that model to a much more democratic model because the information can now flow. The NIH and its grantees figured this out in the roadmap that some of you may remember from 2002, where the concept was that as data became more freely flowable, that we could develop nodes that were capable of both participating and analyzing the data. But we never imagined it would go to the extent it already has. Now, you could take Kaiser out here and you could put in partners, or you could put in the University of North Carolina system, or you could put in the University of California system. What the biggest force in American medicine today, I believe, is the integration of healthcare systems, almost all of which have an academic medical center in the middle, or some way of analyzing data. And so the system not only collects data on everyone in it, but as analytics get better, it's going to be critical that there be an efferent loop that gives the information back in the context of decision support. And in a lecture I'll be giving tomorrow, it was really quite amazing to me when I asked my friends at the FDA, what should I say about e-health? They've asked me to talk about it. They said, decision support is finally here. And this was music to my ears because my career started, my very first paper in the Western Journal of Medicine, 1981, based on my experience with computers, said that within 5 years, every major clinical decision would be supported by computerized information that would assist the doctor. Well, we're about 30 years beyond that, but the time is now here. And so at the FDA and across all federal agencies, actually, in some papers that you'll see in the next month, we believe that the private world, in combination with the assistance of federal agencies, can now create a national system of evidence generation which has the characteristics that we all admire. That is individuality and creativity, but pathways of working together in different ways when the time is right. So if the question is a device surveillance study, as we organize the data at all these different centers, we can bring it together. And I'll call your attention, the little nodes here that we're talking about are integrated health systems, which are already working together because they have common business interests. So one of my sons is an intern in the University of Colorado system. There's an example of a system that's grown tremendously And what used to be dozens of individual research sites now have the same business owner. And so the opportunity here is to have these systems work as units of knowledge, but to share their information, and that's the critical point. No one place, as much information as it may have, or as many patients may be seen in that system, has enough data to create the kinds of evidence that you heard about today from Dr. Hauser and Dr. McCrae. And essentially, once you've got electronic health records, claims data, and the increasing number of quality-driven registries, many of them driven by the American Heart and American College in our field, you have a latticework of information that should be reusable at a very low cost. And so, if you don't have a device question, but you have a drug question, you can use many of the same sites, those that are interested. The fundamental information is the same. The cost of reusing the system should drop dramatically by a log order of more. And this means that we can meet this dramatic need for evidence that we have in a system that has increasing complexity and technological promise. But what if the question is, which treatment do you use? Comparative effectiveness treatment, really the same thing. So the concept here is, we need you, when you go home, to look at your health system and to think about what you can do to change it so it goes from keeping data as an asset to figure out how to share it with other health systems so that we have a much lower cost of generating the evidence that we all need. If we're at the FDA, we need it for regulatory decisions, but practitioners and patients need it to get the best answers to the questions that they have about what treatments are best. The good news here is that we're much further along than most people realize. In an effort that has been going on over the last year, looking at every single health-related federal agency, there's a major project underway to make this happen. And I call your attention to our veterans as really the exemplar here. A few years back, the call went out to veterans with a question: would you donate your data and your biospecimens for the good of other veterans and for the American people in general? The goal was to get 1 million veterans to sign up, and we're already up to 560,000 veterans signed up to donate their data and their biospecimens for the good of science, with the assurance that it's going to be handled in the ways that you know. And here the AHA and ACC, I think, are leading the way in many ways. And I've heard that after my lecture, there may be some very interesting announcements about things that the AHA is doing along these lines. So we've gotten together, and these are the things that we think need to happen. The hardest thing, and the number one thing I want to emphasize, is organized operational systems that bring together research networks embedded in practice, not separate from practice. There are a list of to-do items on here, but I believe that we can do them. When clinical care and research are closely aligned, then we'll truly have the learning health system. And I would point to patients themselves as being the disruptive force that should remind us every day that they're going to benefit most from bringing information together. I would also call your attention to look at the cancer moonshot. There's a lot of public discussion about it, but when the vice president's son had a glioblastoma, in addition to feeling that more money needed to go into research, the vice president came away with a very strong sense that our major cancer centers were not sharing information that could have led to an earlier treatment, not for his son individually, but for the class of people who end up with glioblastoma, a terrible disease. And I would say the same issue exists for heart disease. And so our system today is not particularly attractive because we treat it as one-off. It's not integrated into practice, and we're not giving clinicians the time to interact with their patients in these learning activities. And I love these slides, and I'll go through them quickly because what PCORNet is doing, whether this ends up being the final model or not, is really not the point to me. But what it is bringing together is patients themselves organizing into networks to be more effective in driving the research that they need so that their diseases are treated better, with integrated health systems which provide the construct of data, the collection of information, and the integration of that information, and then funding to create a national infrastructure that can rapidly answer questions. And I'm quite pleased in slides that were recently given to me about this effort, that with a lot of work and a good bit of funding, this one system, and there are others that are in play, has already got data as you can see, on over 42 million people who would be eligible for clinical trials and 83 million who would be eligible for observational studies. So who would have thought we could have 145 million, almost half of America, in a system which is now ready to go for sharing information in clinical research, but also participating actively in the prospective research that we need done. And of course, we need a robust framework for privacy, confidentiality, and security. And I call your attention to the Precision Medicine Initiative, which will start enrollment soon, led by the President, a very big advocate of this. There's a set of privacy and trust principles, which I think, because of tremendous work across the federal government and by numerous consultants and private entities, have brought together a framework that we can operate within. And I think this will be a tremendous umbrella for all of us to work within. And then there's the data. And I'm not going to dwell on the data except to say that I believe we're at the tipping point now where we're figuring out how to make the data better. But there are a few things that need to be done to make the system effective. As an example of where we are, currently at the FDA, thanks to an act of Congress, we have access to an enormous number of Americans' data about the use of prescriptions and their clinical outcomes related to those prescriptions. 193 million Americans are now in this system. We can use it because it's a public health exception to the need for informed consent. We don't use it to study drugs, we use it to study the safety of drugs. But if we can do this, why can't we do it for other parts of research? To make this work, my number one plea to the professional groups is that the people in the greatest need right now are data scientists. Silicon Valley calls these people data janitors, and some people get offended when I use that word. But as a former janitor, I can tell you there's nothing more important than cleaning the place up and getting it orderly. And that's what we need, clinicians who understand the clinical parameters, or scientists who understand the basic science parameters like the genetics and the metabolomics, who can pull the data together in ways that analyses can be done. And we need scientists who will share as an ethical objective of the practice that they have. Of course, we need new methods. I won't dwell on that because I'm 100% sure, given the opportunity, academics will be drawn to developing new methods. But we also need to keep in mind, while we develop new methods, we shouldn't make the system more and more complicated. We need to simplify. And until 2 weeks ago, my lecture said clinical research that's regulated may be the only industry in the U.S. which is getting less efficient over time. Someone raised his hand and said, have you paid college tuition lately? And so I would put university education right up there as a similar issue that will need to be dealt with. If we look at the cost of research the way it's done now in the clinical sphere, it's going up at multi-times the rate of the cost of the consumer price index in general. This is not something that we can afford to do. The good news is, if we look at the kind of system I've just described, and we look at the consumer reports here, I won't dwell on any example. If we take an array of use cases ranging from surveillance in epidemiology of infectious disease to assessment of therapies to the development of biomarkers, we're getting close to a tipping point in this system. So in conclusion, if we had an efficient evidence generation system, translation of discovery to useful medical products will accelerate, something that's important to all of us. Much more of clinical practice could be guided by high-quality evidence, and I believe you'd see a dramatic improvement beyond the 50% improvement that we've already seen. Policy decisions would be rational, something I've gained a great appreciation for in my recent job experience. And clinicians and their practice organizations could focus on interpreting the evidence and applying it instead of trying to figure out what to do through an educated guess. So the role of opinion and expertise, I would argue, would be at least as important. There would still be a major role for clinicians, but it would be put to a much higher purpose, providing precision health care. And as President Obama said, so much work has gone into creating this time for what you've heard from the American Heart Association today, and from me, from the federal government, that I believe we will look 10 years from now and say we participated in a revolution driven by the technologies being available, but by a cultural and ethical principle of sharing of information for the benefit of our patients and for better practice. Thank you.
And now I'd like to ask CEO Nancy Brown to join me once again on the stage.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you, Dr. Calif, for those inspiring remarks that couldn't have done a better job to frame these two announcements that I'm honored to have a chance to make today. The American Heart Association has long been a catalyst in achieving breakthroughs in science, and I'm proud to join you to share these announcements with you today that are designed to accelerate our approach to discovery and collaboration while putting patients at the center of research. First, I'm pleased to announce a new strategic business relationship with Amazon Web Services. Together, we have created the Precision Medicine Platform, a global, secure, and diverse data discovery marketplace that will help revolutionize how researchers and clinicians can access and analyze data to accelerate cardiovascular science. Imagine data that is easier to discover and share. Imagine data analysis that is reproducible and data sets that have just the data you need to accomplish your research goals. Imagine leaving behind costly and time-consuming models of exploration. Through the Precision Medicine Platform, researchers will be able to cut through the clutter of traditional research approaches and the barriers of today's data silos. We will uncover critical insights that could impact millions of lives. In support of this new marketplace, the American Heart Association and Amazon Web Services are also making available $5 million in data grants to help facilitate new approaches to discovery and new data scientists to help us in our fight against cardiovascular diseases and stroke. We are changing the way research is done, and we believe the Precision Medicine Platform is what is needed to establish a new paradigm for scientific collaboration. Several early data partners have joined us by contributing a vast array of curated, rich data sets to the platform. These data partners are just as excited as we are about this opportunity to significantly change how science is done. I would like to thank these early adopters and partners: AstraZeneca, Cedars-Sinai Heart Institute, the Dallas Heart Study, the Duke Clinical Research Institute, the Intermountain Medical Center Heart Institute, the International Stroke Genetics Consortium, and the Stanford Cardiovascular Institute. These initial partners have brought their data to this unprecedented effort. In addition, we're actively exploring opportunities to collaborate with the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute to create meaningful solutions for patients. Let's take a look at what our data partners have to say.
If you believe disease is complex, then the data to define that disease has to be complex.
In the past, data has been locked up in individual databases and not open to the world of researchers.
Scientists work primarily in silos, where access to other data and sharing of methods is rare.
To do this kind of precision work requires giant numbers of individuals. All of us, even who have really large studies, don't have enough people ourselves to do those really nuanced things.
Organizations from around the globe are already utilizing the AWS cloud to make their data open and available to the public. The American Heart Association's research is so important. Amazon Web Services is proud to be part of that research through our collaboration on AHA's Institute for Precision Cardiovascular Medicine.
The Precision Medicine Platform is like everybody is invited to the same party. All the data, tools, and researchers under one roof.
People will be contributing different types of data, all coming from experts in their field.
By combining data from multiple sources, investigators can study large numbers of patients, allowing them to develop precise therapies for each individual patient.
We at AWS can offer our expertise in activating the immense computational and analytical power necessary to manage an information ecosystem of this magnitude.
Technology opens doors, because as soon as you have a new technology, it allows you to see into areas that you didn't even know that you could measure before.
The ability to upload and download data in a cloud-based solution really has a lot of promise to shorten the research time.
We owe this to the patient and the investigators who have helped us building this database and it's our way to give back to the academic community and scientific community what they have given to us.
Precision medicine platform is going to be a game changer for researchers, freeing up data and allowing us to make discoveries that will help patients every day.
This conference is an opportunity to bring global minds together to solve these problems. And we at AWS are very excited to partner with the AHA to make those discoveries a reality.
With the help of these data partners and the extraordinary computational access of Amazon Web Services, we believe the precision medicine platform will allow us to leapfrog other disease areas in finding treatments and cures for patients. We've also witnessed how the intersection of digital technology and individuals' desire to control their own health data has created a new revolution in healthcare. And that's why today we are launching My Research Legacy, a secure online network allowing people to donate their lifestyle and genetic data and play a direct role in accelerating discovery. Our goal is to engage hundreds of thousands of patients over the next several years. We've teamed up with the Broad Institute of Harvard and MIT, who will build the network and the user engagement model for My Research Legacy. The AHA and the Broad Institute have also launched a pilot study to engage 2,000 patients between the ages of 21 and 50 who have suffered a heart attack, a stroke, atrial fibrillation, aortic dissection, or heart failure with reduced ejection fraction. Throughout history, far too many lives have been impacted before the age of 50 by cardiovascular diseases and stroke. We all have friends and family that have suffered from these events, and we've witnessed the impact of cardiovascular diseases on well-known people like those you see on the screens around you. Each one of these individuals provides an inspiration for our work. We recently had a chance to talk to Eric Lander at the Broad Institute and individuals who've been impacted, and I'd like you to have a chance to hear from them directly.
I was 47.
I was 46.
I was 43.
I was 40.
I was 39.
I was 38.
I was 31.
I was 27.
I was 24.
I was 8.
I felt the most excruciating pain of my life.
I thought they were just stress headaches.
I had no idea I was going to have a stroke.
Growing up with Marfan syndrome, I lived my entire life with a fear of aortic dissection.
I don't have risk factors. This can't be happening to me.
I went into cardiac arrest.
The doctor pulled my family in and said that I'd had a major stroke.
Parker looked at me and said, "Mom, you're having a stroke."
And understanding the reality of having to talk to my children, wanting them to know that I loved them and that they needed to be good people in life.
You know, as a parent, you're supposed to be able to comfort your children, and he was having to save my life.
The most emotional part of all of that was knowing they drove 8 hours overnight, hoping that they would see their daughter wake up the next day.
The AHA has shown amazing leadership with its project to be able to give patients an opportunity to share. The Broad Institute, which very much believes in this goal, is working with the AHA to be able to capture and analyze those data from those patients who want to share it to really drive down our understanding about the causes and the best treatments for cardiovascular disease.
I think it's important for all of us to tell our stories. I think it's important for the stories to be collected in some fashion and shared.
I think that any time that we have an opportunity to participate in research, that it's our responsibility to.
You don't have to do nothing. You don't have to be passive.
We are a data-driven society now, even more so in healthcare.
We can put a hand in on science.
Most things like this wouldn't happen without the American Heart Association, and the fact that they're making it a patient-centered care and wanting to know how we feel is huge.
The most transformative thing about scientific research in the future, it's not going to be a fancy molecular biology lab. It's not going to be some high-powered microscope. It's not even going to be powerful computers. It's going to be patients. We can learn so much more from patients than from any other thing. Everything in the research enterprise eventually is going to get organized around patients, because that's where all the information about clinical medicine really lies.
Joining me now on stage are several of the patients you've just met. They are serving as volunteer champions to represent the voices of patients in research and in my research legacy. These champions will share their story and their data for greater good, and they will work to inspire others to do the same. My thanks to each of you for your passion and your incredible commitment to improving the health of every patient who faces cardiovascular diseases and stroke. We are so grateful to have your voice at the center of our work. Everything the American Heart Association achieves is made possible by the selfless dedication of countless individuals who share our commitment to improve cardiovascular health. Our clinicians, our scientists, our lay volunteers, our donors, and our patients make an extraordinary difference in the work we do every day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nancy, and thanks to all of our wonderful partners and patients that we'll be working with through the Precision Medicine Platform and my research legacy. Before we conclude this session, I want to encourage each of you during your conversations this week to always keep in mind the voice of the patient and to keep them at the center of your work. We owe it to those that have come before us to ensure that their voices resonate in all we do. And finally, I would like to thank you all for joining us this week. I hope you enjoy your stay here in New Orleans and that your experiences at Scientific Session truly enrich your life. Our opening session is concluded. Thank you for coming.